Hello and welcome to another edition of the Forza Napoli podcast. I am your host, Joe Fischetti. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. On today's episode, we are going to review Napoli's 1-0 defeat to Torino at the Stadio Olimpico di Torino. It was another match where we conceded the first goal, this time to an ex-player. It had to be Cholito Simeone to score the goal against us. And so Napoli have lost now 2 of their last 3 Serie A matches. There's a big logjam at the top of the Serie A table. There's plenty to talk about with injuries, the goal we conceded, the inability to score, our backup striker. But before we get into all of that, let me bring in today's guest. He is the vice president of the Tri-State Napoli Club. He's certainly no stranger to the podcast. Peter Scala, welcome back.
Thanks, Joe. I'm glad to be able to make the jump to video. For this with
you. yeah, we're doing a bit of a video tour in season 1 for those of you who are watching this on YouTube. Of course, if you're just listening to the audio version, then you surely recognize Pete's voice. So, like I said, we lose 1-0. Antonio Conte's horrible away record against Torino continues. Apparently, he hasn't won a match against Torino in Torino as a coach, that is, since 2013. But I think there's only one question that we can really start this podcast with, and that is, how do you think Napoli are going to do in Serie B next season?
Yeah, that seems to be what Napoli fans are all thinking right now. And it's funny because I was looking at some of last year's results. I'm going to start from January 5th, mainly just because I can bring up the fact that Napoli beat Juventus 2-1. But after that, the next games were a draw against Roma, a draw against Udinese, a draw against Lazio, a loss to Como, and then we tied 1-1 to Inter. So it's early in the season. Don't get too disheartened with some drop points.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're not going to win every game of the season. I know people are looking at, how many games did we drop at this point last season? How many games have our competitors dropped? I think, at least at the outset, it looks like this season might be even more competitive than last season was. Sorry, as you know, we all know that last season went down to the final match of the season and could end up being that way over the course of a 38-game season. Things tend to spread out a little bit, but as of right now, and we're recording this on Saturday night, so Milan haven't played yet. There's a 3-way tie at the top of the table because Inter beat Roma. I don't think they deserve to win that match either, but in the end, they got their 1-0 victory. Milan play against Fiorentina on Sunday. Maybe by the time you hear this or see this episode, that result will be in, and so Milan could be top of the table, but even if they do, they'll be on 16 points, only 1 point clear of the other 3. So there is certainly a long way to go, I think. Naturally, as passionate supporters, especially Neapolitan supporters, you're seeing all kinds of crazy things on social media and everyone's freaking out. and we'll get into some of the reasons why. But I think it's still far, far too early. There's a long way to go. No need to freak out too much. One thing I do want to get to is, or at least start the podcast with, is the injury crisis that we're seeing at Napoli right now. We already knew, obviously, Lukaku's out for a while with a hamstring injury. Apparently, his recovery is ahead of schedule. I think they're saying he should be back in the middle of December. Mana was interviewed after the match, or I believe it was after the match, and he said probably in the next week or 2, Lukaku's going to return to Napoli. So that's a good sign. Lobotka got hurt in the Genoa match before the international break, a right adductor injury, which is usually a 4 to 6 week recovery time. So that would put his return around the end of October, early November timeframe. Amir Rahmani is recovering still from his hamstring injury, but he should be back probably in the next couple of weeks. Buongiorno returned to the lineup, but he wasn't in the starting 11. He also had a adductor injury, and obviously we saw him as a substitute in the second half. And Politano had a glute injury. He broke his ass, basically. But he's also recovered in like record time. He was clearly not 100% when he came in this match off the bench. That was probably something they didn't want to do, but felt that like they had to in this case. But I mean, the real shocker for a lot of us, probably most of us, was the fact that Rasmus Højlund and Scott McTominay were not in the lineup. Højlund apparently has a thigh strain, so we'll see. Again, sometimes with these muscle injuries, it really depends on the severity. So you look at Lukaku's injury, that's a muscle injury, but he's going to be out for months, whereas the more minor ones could only be a couple of weeks recovery time. And then with McTominay, it was originally reported as like a bruised ankle, but then Conte said after the match that he had to get 6 stitches on his ankle. So I don't know what happened. Presumably something happened in training where he got cut and he just didn't feel quite ready to go, so they didn't risk it. But like obviously we have the benefit of hindsight, but how impactful was the loss of these two players in particular in terms of this match and this result?
Well, I mean, a lot of the players that you've mentioned on the top part, like, they've been gone for a little bit, with the exception of Politano. But Højlund has been such a rejuvenating force in the Napoli attack. And even we saw on international duty, he's kept up his form. And obviously, whenever you lose the Serie A Player of the Year, that's really going to hurt. And these injuries have seemed to have happened in a pretty short term. So the team didn't really get a chance to adjust to them not being there in training. So I think that played a huge part of today's poor performance.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Højlund, like I agree. I think both players are really important to this team. I think a lot of people are underestimating the value of McTominay because he's not contributing as many goals and assists as he did last season. And I think this match showed that he's still a very valuable and very important piece of this lineup because we did, like, I don't know, it seemed like Anguissa and De Bruyne looked a little bit tired. They probably had to do more running because McTominay wasn't there. Also, these are all guys that all played during the international break. McTominay, and at least in one match, I think in both of Scotland's matches, he played the full 90 minutes. Højlund didn't play the full 90 minutes, but he started both of Denmark's matches. And so you have to think that somehow contributed when, like, these muscle injuries, this is not rocket science. Your muscles can only handle so much workload. And so you add in all these international matches, you add in Champions League. He's really been thrown into the starting position for every match because we'll get to Lucca in a second, but Lucca's not ready yet, and Lukaku's hurt. So Højlund's been playing a lot of minutes. It does, looking back, seem like it was only a matter of time before that happened. But what's worse, though, I think, is that Højlund was in fantastic form. I saw, I think it was Opta who said that he, at least prior to Saturday, because Erling Haaland scored a couple of goals on Saturday for City, but they were tied with the most goals for club and country since the start of October. Haaland got 2 goals, so he's now ahead. But to think this is a guy that was really struggling at Manchester United, and in such a short time frame, he just completely turned it around. He's looked like a completely different player. 8 goals and 1 assist since joining Napoli for club and country. He scored 3 goals during this most recent international break, 2 against Belarus, 1 against Greece. He had an assist as well. He looks happier. He's smiling. Even his acne went away. He really looks like a completely different person. I was listening. I saw some quotes floating around. Some of them were misquoted, so I looked up the podcast. But Peter Schmeichel was on a BBC podcast called Sacked in the Morning. And he, I mean, obviously he's a little bit biased because he's Danish and so is Højlund. But what he said, and I've seen this from a lot of United supporters, is that Højlund was just not used properly at United. He's a guy that needs to get service and needs to be played in behind, and he has the pace and the strength. And we've seen that's how he's been used at Napoli and how he's had success. And so it's not shocking that when you give him a teammate like De Bruyne who can make those passes, that he's going to have success. And he felt like United kind of prematurely sold him right before they brought in the types of players that could give him that type of service that he needs. And he said he's like a 25-goal scorer for them. And then on McTominay, he also talked a lot about on that podcast about how, you know, United's always had this history of bringing players through their youth system, and McTominay was that guy, and again, used often out of position. And even McTominay scored for Scotland during the international break, and his reaction to that goal, for anyone who saw it, was one of kind of like, it was almost like he was more angry or like angry, or like it was like an aggressive kind of stern look that like he stuck it to the haters a little bit because he was catching a lot of flack. So yeah, I think the not having Højlund and McTominay really did have an impact on our match. Obviously, in terms of scoring, we could have really used someone like Højlund.
Absolutely. And it's funny, before he got introduced into the squad, it wasn't super loud, but you heard some Napoli fans talking about maybe Kevin De Bruyne's kind of passed it a little bit. And then the second a player like Højlund came in that, like you mentioned, does really well with players like De Bruyne behind him, people like that's, you don't really hear any complaints about him anymore. Everyone's talking about how great he is and how it feels like he didn't lose a step anymore. So honestly, the Lukaku injury might have been a blessing in disguise. Obviously, Lukaku is a great player, and I have no doubts that he would have been great for us this season. But how long do you really expect him to stay at Napoli, where Højlund could potentially be a player that's here around about 5 years? So you might have found your new striker for the future in Højlund. So it's funny how things work out. Of course, I feel terrible for Lukaku. I'm super excited for when he comes back. You know, he doesn't strike me as the type that if Conte decides to have him as more of a bench role, that he's going to kick and fuss about it. But, you know, it brings out a lot of different interesting options for formation-wise that Conte could play with the two strikers.
Well, and I think the best case scenario is to have both of them healthy, because what we're seeing is that this schedule is so brutal that like you don't want just one of them playing anyways. And I think it's kind of the perfect scenario because you have the veteran player and you have the young guy who can learn from the veteran, and they're both going to get their minutes, so they should both be happy. And then Lucca will have far less pressure on him because he'll be the third option. And like this was the type of match where we really could have used Lucca because we could have used Lukaku, because we saw, like, you can see that Lucca is just not ready yet, and you can see what Conte is trying to do with him, because he's trying to play that hold up kind of role, but he just cannot get the ball to stick. Like it. Granted, I don't think he got great service either, and we can debate whether he should be even used as a hold up player. If Conte thinks that's the right thing, I'm going to trust Conte. But with his size, you would think you would want to put the ball into the box more and let him go win it in the air. But when we did try to pass to him, he very rarely controlled the ball. There were so many poor touches. And I mean, on one hand, I think it's harsh that he got so much criticism because he was never meant to be starting so early in the season. On the other hand, I think it's kind of justified because this really was a poor performance, and we really needed someone to contribute goals in this game, and it wasn't going to be him. That was clear.
Yeah, I mean, to bring a little bit of a hockey analogy, Joe, I don't know if you're super familiar with the New York Rangers, but they have a player named Matt Rempe, who's very tall, but the best way to describe his skating is like a newborn deer. And that's a lot of the vibes that I get from Lucca when he's trying to control the ball. I agree. Like the point you made, I think some of it is warranted, the criticism. However, there's a reason why Conte and Mana brought him in. He might not be ready, but you shouldn't give up on him at all. I mean, let's not forget, not that long ago, he scored a goal to make it 3-1, and we won that game 3-2. So he has already impacted games for us in a positive way. Yes, he has not been good enough, and he needs to improve, but to act like he hasn't done anything, that's a silly take. And again, I've said it before. I remember like one of the episodes of last year, I think right before the season started, I said, let Conte cook. I mean, still, let him cook. If he trusted Lucca that he was going to come in here and have an impact at, with something, then it would be crazy to cut bait with him or think you need to get rid of him on loan in January.
Yeah, I remember you saying that because I used it as the title of that episode as well. But you're right. And what's interesting, though, is that the goal he scored was more like the types of goals that he scored for Udinese last year. So, again, it's like Conte's working with them. That's a mini project in itself. But at the same time, you wonder, okay, maybe we need to slowly teach him that and still allow him to play the way he did at Udinese. I don't know. But I think part of the reason why I'm maybe a little bit more critical of Lucca is because he was uber confident in his kind of presentation press conference, where I remember he was asked if there are any defenders in the league that scared him. And he basically said, no, he's not scared of anybody. And mind you, you want your strikers to be really confident, but at the same time, if you're going to be that confident, you gotta back it up. Exactly. And right now it looks like those defenders are not as scared either. Or they're not scared of him whatsoever because they're all shutting him down. So, that's something that I think we at some point, with this schedule, and especially if this Højlund injury ends up taking a bit of time, we really are going to need Lucca to start contributing. That said, I do feel like a defeat is a bit of a harsh result here. I mean, if we look at the match stats, the XG was pretty even, 1.97 to 1.83 for Torino. We took 22 shots in this match. 5 of them hit the target. We had nearly 70% ball possession, 11 corner kicks, which at this point, if we get a corner kick, we might as well just give them a goal kick because we either take it short or we can't get the ball past the first post, which is infuriating. For some reason, I don't know. I guess because a lot of our corner kicks in this match were on the right side, of the attacking half of the field. So, and we wanted to take in swinging corner kicks. It looked like so we were using Politano and Neres rather than De Bruyne, who's our best set piece taker. So I don't know. Maybe we should just use De Bruyne to take out swinging corner kicks. And then, of course, we had the disallowed goal. So, I don't know. I feel like a draw was probably a fair result. Do you feel the same way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit Napoli slanted, but this is a Napoli podcast. So, yeah, I mean, a draw wouldn't be would be fairish. At the same time, I don't think Napoli did enough to deserve a draw either. Yeah, they didn't play as badly as, look at the possession. It's pretty heavily in Napoli's favor. But what did you do with that possession? It wasn't a ton. Some of the ideas were there, but in the final third of the field, execution obviously wasn't. So I think when you factor in it against your opponent that you should definitely beat, maybe they did. Torino did deserve the win there.
Yeah, I think the standout kind of negative from this match was just the finishing, and Conte kind of called that out after the match as well. He called out 2 things. One, he said, he basically said we played like ballerinas in the first half, or I think he said we were wearing our ballet shoes or something like that, And I think what he meant was we were just a little too nice, not angry, not mean enough in that first half. He did say we played a lot better in the second half, and I tend to agree. We were obviously, Torino's defending a lead, so they were sitting back a bit more, but we really took it to them in the second half. I felt like we created enough chances. I mean, the XG reflects that 1.83. Like, what that means is if you were to play this exact same match a million times, most of the time you're going to score 2 goals in that match. But the finishing, like we had, off the top of my head, I can think of maybe four decent chances. There was the through ball that Gilmore played to Lorenzo Lucca in the first half where he kind of slid. Maybe that's a half chance. It wasn't an easy chance to finish. There was the Olivetta chance where you just wish that fell to some, like, a player who's not a defender and at least someone who's right-footed, because he tried to use the outside of his left foot, which is his stronger foot, to flick that ball in, when he would have been much better off using the instep of his right boot, maybe even doing what Genoa did to us, that type of back heel. And then in the second half, we had 2 really big chances, very, very similar chances. I think one was created by Spinazzola and the other by Lang, where it was kind of just beating their man on the left wing, cutting the ball into the area. And De Bruyne put one of them over the bar, and Almas put the other one over the bar. So we had the Anguissa header as well that it looked like, I don't know if it hit the bar, if Israel's kind of tipped it over the bar and his hand hit the bar, but we had a fair number of chances. And then, of course, we had the goal that was disallowed in stoppage time. So I think you put all of that together and you say, okay, maybe we deserved a better result. It was pretty unlucky. I mean, credit to Politano, because, like I said, he was definitely not fully recovered. You could see the way he was playing. The one thing that really stood out to me is that Politano, very often, when he receives a pass close to the touchline, and he's facing his own goal, he'll play like a first time kind of long ball over the top, sort of arching ball. And he just wasn't doing that in this match. And when I saw that, I thought, okay, I couldn't remember. I think it's his left leg that he had the injury. Maybe I'm wrong. Either way, even if it was his right leg, he probably didn't have the strength to kind of plant to play that type of pass. So that made me think, okay, he's not. And even after he would play a pass, he kind of put his head down. And like, he really looked like he was struggling. And yet he created our best chance. What was maybe even more unlucky than the VAR disallowing the goal was the fact that Politano's shot itself didn't end up in the back of the goal. It hit the upright.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Politano being hurt and still having a positive performance today kind of just goes to show how important he is to the squad. I don't know. I mean, maybe Meta might be the only more controversial Napoli player than Politano, but like, this guy doesn't get anywhere near the credit he deserves. It reminds me a lot of Mario Rui back in the day, where he just kind of got disrespected. But he's been there for 3 different coaches. Each coach has him be a starter. There's clearly a reason why. I'm not going to go as far to say that Napoli goes as far as Politano would take them, mainly because that's an insane statement. But it's cool to see a player that hasn't been universally loved by the fans kind of start to, everyone at this point, you're blind or just a pure hater to say that he isn't a key player here. So the fact that he wasn't 100% and Napoli played as poor as they did, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, Conte was the one who kicked him out of Inter, and now he has him as like our vice captain, because he's worn the armband a few times. So he's also matured quite a bit, and we've heard that from Conte as well, that Politano has matured. He's shown a willingness to work hard, right, and to score less because he's working so hard. Maybe I'm going to go off script a little bit here, but a player who's starting to become more controversial, I'm curious to know your thoughts, is Giovanni Di Lorenzo. Both for the national team, and now even a little bit for Napoli. Is this just like he's clocked so many kilometers over the years, basically playing every minute? Is this, is that workload just finally catching up to him?
I think so. I mean, he's 32 years old, which is kind of old for a fullback. I was going back on Google, and I could have missed a game, but in league games, because obviously apparently it takes a red card for Di Lorenzo to actually get a break during these games. So obviously he missed the Sporting game, but in league games, the last game he didn't play, and it was because of yellow card accumulation, was April 14th, 2025. Granted, I know he had an off season of recovering, but he still had a Conte off season, so that is probably worse than a full season. So yeah, I mean, I can't be mad at him. I can't blame him. He's probably exhausted, and Mazzocchi's his backup. I'm sorry. I know Mazzocchi he's from Naples, and we're all supposed to love him, but like, let's call a spade. He sucks. Like, it's unfortunate. I like him as a person, and he's from Naples, so like I want to root for him, but like he's not backup quality for Napoli. And that shows the fact that Di Lorenzo can never get a day off. He runs a lot. It's not like he just kind of sits back. He's always in the attack, and he has to run back on defense, and he has to deal with Conte training sessions. Like, yeah, you'd be exhausted too.
Yeah, and then he also plays every minute for the national team, because there really isn't, if you look at every position on the field, right back is probably the least depth that Italy has. So he ends up playing every minute for the national team as well. Mazzocchi,
sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was like, if you're like me, you actually get upset when players get called up to the national team from Naples. Oh, yeah. I don't want to please stop calling up our players. I don't care about your international breaks.
Yeah, especially with Holland and Norway just running away with, like, we've secured our playoff spot. Italy has, so yeah, like I was happy we only had 10 players called up, and then we still lost one, so it sucks. Mazzocchi is at best a mid-table Serie A player, probably more likely a bottom half, player on a bottom half team. I know some people have been complaining that we didn't get a backup right back for Di Lorenzo, but I think that's largely because we had to pivot and go sign another striker for 50 million euros. So it was a sacrifice we had to make. Before we get to the goal we conceded, which also had a big luck factor, you're in the US, and so you get your matches on Paramount or CBS, and clips were going around of a guy who's becoming probably the most hated commentator or pundit, I guess, for Napoli fans, and that's Mike Grella. He had some. Can you just, before you give your opinion, just sort of recap what his comments were after this match, and then what you thought of them?
Basically, it boils down to more or less he said that he was seeing Conte celebrate again after scoring a goal at the last second to salvage a point, and while him knowing that the goal was disallowed before Conte realized it, and he got joy out of seeing that happen. I'll put it to you through my perspective. I was at work today. Now, luckily, my boss is super cool, and he more or less lets me watch the games as long as it doesn't really affect my work. So now I was watching the game in the office. Napoli scored. I saw Lang took his shirt off. I'm sure we'll get into that. And I was like, all right, 1-1, fine. Turned the game off, went back to work. About 2 hours later, I'm scrolling through Twitter, and I see that Mike Grella video and saying that he's excited that Napoli got the goal disallowed. And I was like, oh no. We lost. I was okay with 1-1, but listen, at the end of the day, and Napoli fans, and I say this including myself, it's our fault. Because I don't know a fan base that gets more easily upset with these whenever anyone talks badly about the team the Napoli fans. And at the end of the day, for them, it's all about clicks, it's all about views and engagement. They're engagement farming. That's all Mike Grella is doing. He's trying to piss you off. He wants your clicks, he wants your comments on his videos, because that's what his job is. So I understand it. I don't like it. I think it's a little unprofessional. You're supposed to be an unbiased commentator for the league. You're saying you're taking joy out of seeing a guy celebrate when a goal got taken away. It's a little immature in my opinion. But what makes it a little bit more hypocritical on top of that is he can criticize the way Napoli plays, but he's a Juventus fan who saw the same system in Juventus for years and benefited from it, and everything was fine then. It was no big deal. But now that Napoli's doing it, all of a sudden we're expected to play the way we did under Maurizio Sarri, even though we didn't win anything then. So I don't care the way people who aren't Napoli fans, and even to some extent Napoli fans, view the team of how we play. I care about wins and losses. I care that we've won 2 Scudettos in 3 years. And I know we're a little superstitious, but we're in the running for back-to-back and 3 and 4 years. That's a dream. But we got to stop being so worried about what outside noise is saying.
Yeah, a part of me thinks this is all just scripted, or it's a bit of an act, and because we keep giving it so much attention, he just keeps doing it. And what's ironic is now Marco Messina, who's also one of the pundits on that broadcast, has become loved by Napoli supporters because despite being a Juventino, he's been defending Napoli and Conte. Mind you, I think a big part of that is because he really does get how Conte is successful, having seen him at Juventus. And so, yeah, I don't know what to make of it. I guess it's fun in the end of the day. It's fun to kind of hate on the guy.
Yeah.
He seems to have fun hating on Napoli. It's not the end of the world. I do want to talk about, going back to the luck factor, about the goal that we conceded. It was, of course, it had to be Cholito Simeone that scored the goal, but it happened in a bit of a bizarre way. Temezic received the pass sort of on the wide right side. Simeone actually made a very smart run, because with his run, he kind of opened up the space for Temezic to pick out, I think it was Che Adams just outside the area. He was surrounded by, I think, at least 3 or 4 Napoli players. Gilmore tries to tackle the ball and inadvertently pokes it to Simeone, which is the only way Simeone could score in that position, because he was offside. But because it was a Napoli player that played the ball to him, there is no offside, and he goes on to score. What did you make of that goal, and perhaps more so Simeone's reaction after scoring the goal?
Yeah, Simeone might have been more upset than I was at that goal, honestly.
He really looked sorry that he scored.
Yeah, and listen, I know last year he didn't play great, and he scored, I think, 1 goal all year. But I'll always love him. He poured his heart out. He poured his heart out for the team. He quote tweeted my club's tweet at him, the video of us celebrating his goal against Roma. So I'll always have that personal attachment to him. But of course it was him. Of course he scored. If I still did sports betting, I 100% would have put money on him scoring, because of course he was. Honestly, the goal, it is what it is. I think you talked about it a little bit. Maybe we talked about it beforehand about Conte just saying it wasn't like a defensive mistake. It just, sometimes when we've seen it for us this season, we've been a little bit lucky sometimes, and sometimes it goes against you. So honestly, it's just kind of funny that it was Cholito. Of course it was. But that's football. It is what it is.
Yeah, and it almost made us like him even more. Part of the reason why we liked him so much as a Napoli player, even though he didn't score a whole lot last season, or really last 2 seasons, was because he was so selfless. He just graciously accepted his role. And so we were not upset to see him leave or happy for him that he was going to get to play more. And this was also the guy that scored a hat-trick against us when he was a Fiorentina player. So he's a bit of a Napoli killer when he's not on Napoli. We should have maybe just kept him so he can't score against us. But, he's so likable. Like, even beyond just the way he reacted to this goal, he looked like his eyes were teared and kept on apologizing to the fans. I almost thought to myself, like, he's going to lose some Torino supporters here. He seems more interested in the few Napoli fans are there. But even before the match, he had given an interview and he talked about how he when he left Napoli, I don't know if he took a train to the north, and he was trying to write his farewell kind of like a social media message. And he said during the entire 5-hour train ride, he didn't write anything until like the last half hour because he just cried the whole time. I was like, oh my God, like this guy is so likable. And so obviously you don't want him to score against us, but it always seems to happen that way. And to his credit, like what I will say is that he had plenty of work to do. At first I thought he blew it by not shooting first time. But he just had the patience. He waited out Di Lorenzo, who slid past him. He waited out Vanya, who stretched and couldn't get there. And then he had the calm to and the steadiness to put the ball away. So, yeah, again, unfortunate in how it played out. Hats off to Cholito. He now has 3 goals on the season. And Torino I think they only have 8 points all season, including this victory, and 6 of those points have come in matches that he scored in. So he's definitely making a difference for Torino. I do want to close on some of the more positive notes, and again, we started the podcast this episode by talking about how like we don't need to go crazy and start talking about Serie B. Obviously, we're joking about that. And so we can close on a bit of a positive as well, because I do think there were a few positive takeaways for me, and we can talk about each of them in more detail. But I thought Spinazzola was again a positive. Seemed like he was the only one creating chances. He had a couple shots that were kind of straight at the keeper, but he did score a goal earlier this season. Was it against Pisa? I can't remember who it was against, where it was a very similar type of play where he cut in and he scored in the bottom corner. It didn't happen on this match. And frankly, it just felt like it was one of those nights where things were just not going to go our way. Another one was Noah Lang, who had his longest and I think best appearance so far in a Napoli shirt. I thought he was really positive. We mentioned that chance he created for, I think his was the Elmas chance, and then the disallowed goal. And then the return of Buongiorno, I think, is very positive. I was happy he didn't start, frankly, because even though the reports were that he had fully recovered, Conte said in his pre-match press conference that he had like 4 full training sessions before this match. I just don't want him to become one of these players that we never get to see what he could end up being because he's always injured. So I was glad he didn't start. I think we had to bring him in because Jesus had that early yellow card. But for me, those were the kind of 3 positive takeaways from this match.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree. Spinazzola might be our most consistent player this year, just because, you could say Højlund, he hasn't played the full season yet. I mean, for Lang, personally, for me, yeah, this is probably his best performance, but I take a lot of negative points off for his reaction when he's like, I'm sorry, I get it. It's your first goal for Napoli. You're excited, but there were still 2 minutes left. Like when he scored, like run back, grab the ball, run back, and try for the last 2 minutes. Like even if the goal counted, it looks way worse that the goal doesn't count because you got a yellow card for nothing now. You still have 2 minutes. Just fight for the goal. A 1-1 tie is not worthy of taking your shirt off for a celebration. So
yeah, and I must say, I was watching the game with my son Evan, and we both also celebrated prematurely. Evan just started singing the Waka song, and I joined in. So the two of us, like goofs, are singing this song, and my wife's looking at us funny, and we're doing dumb dances, and then sure enough, the ball gets taken away, and Evan actually just stormed off to his room. He didn't even watch the end of the match. So he's becoming. I've made him into a true passionate Napoli supporter. Unfortunately, that was because the goal was disallowed. But yeah, I agree on that piece. But I do wonder after this performance and given the injury crisis, if we're going to see him start on Tuesday, because we're playing against his former club in PSV in the Champions League. So
I don't know. I think Conte's going to send him to the Shadow Realm
for the ilk.
Yeah, I don't know if we're going to see him for a while. That it's a bad look.
Yeah, you're probably right. We'll see. I hope though that Buongiorno starts. I think he's ready to go, and I do wonder too. Even like I think McTominay will probably be back as well, because it sounds like, you hear like 6 stitches. That sounds pretty bad, but listening to Conte's press conference, it sounds like McTominay tried to give it a go even for this match, and just they kind of collectively decided. McTominay told them doesn't feel right, and so they chose not to risk it. But that makes me think, in a couple more days, maybe McTominay will get back into the lineup as well. So we should be have a more complete squad for that Champions League match.
Yeah, and like you said, we have a game Tuesday, so if he's not 100%, you give him a couple extra days. Hopefully he's ready to go for the Champions League. As far as Buongiorno goes, yeah, again, it's good that he got some time off the bench because he hasn't played in a while. But it's a completely different Napoli team when he plays. Unfortunately, he can't seem to stay healthy. But if they can figure that out, that defense is going to be really good.
Yeah, and again, it was. I do feel like this stat is a little bit misleading when you go look back at some of the goals we've conceded, but nonetheless, it's true, and that is that we've now conceded a goal in 7 consecutive matches in all competitions. So that is something that, like, we know defenses tend to win the league, and we're conceding more. Roma have a very good defense. Milan have a very good defense. And I feel like having Buongiorno back in the lineup should help with that. Again, I think it's a little premature to draw any conclusions.
I agree.
It obviously doesn't hurt to have him back. And to your point, like, yeah, as long as he stays healthy, we're a much better side. He was like our marquee signing last season. It seems like so long ago now. But I think that is a big positive. Pete, any final thoughts on this match before we wrap up the pod?
Oh, not necessarily on this. Well, it does involve this match. Again, this is for the freaking out crowd. So far this season, Inter have 2 losses. Napoli now have 2 losses. Roma have 2 losses. Milan have a loss, and they haven't played yet. They play tomorrow. Juventus has 3 draws, which might as well be like 2 losses. And Atalanta has 4 draws. So the top teams that we are fighting against for the Scudetto are also dropping points. Yes, you should beat Torino. I get that. You're not wrong. But everybody else is dropping points too. What matters, if we lose to Inter, our next game, maybe we can have a little bit of a different conversation. Still not panic, but we can start to have that conversation. But if we beat them, then everyone's back on cloud 9. Everyone except for Mike Grella is back in the Napoli train. So, yeah, again, you should beat Torino, but like Milan, that everyone's lauding to be the team that's going to win because they only play 1 game a week, they lost to Cremonese, who are like. We're on Joe's podcast. We're going to be respectful and not say what I wanted to say. But they're just not that good. We'll just say that. So, just relax, guys. Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay.
Wow, this is like a whole new Pete. Winning 2 Scudetti has really changed you. I'm a little bit disappointed, but
honestly, it isn't as much as Napoli as it is, and not even so much the Mets as the hat I'm wearing. It's the Jets, man. When you're a Jets fan and you have fans of other teams, it's like, wow, guys. There's no rock bottom. It just gets worse after that. So like, A loss against Torino, that's fine. I can survive with that.
Yeah, speaking of the NFL, shout out to our good friend Mohammed Salad, who was part of the NFL in London crew. I can't remember which Niners player. I'm not big enough football fan to
Marquise Golden.
Yeah. So he had a cool little interview with him. Check that out. Just a quick shout out there while we're talking about the NFL. But yeah, I completely agree with you. Let's stay calm. Long season. You look at last season, everybody dropped a lot more points, so I wouldn't read too much into this. I do think we've probably had a slightly bit of an easier schedule, I want to say, because besides the Milan match, I don't think we've really had any. Well, maybe Fiorentina, but they haven't been very good this season. Hopefully they can steal some points off of Milan, but it really doesn't matter this early into the season. Don't lose. Trust me, don't lose any hair over this match. But I guess the good thing is that one of the nice things about playing in the Champions League is that you don't really have much time to dwell on these results anyways, because we are right back into it. And even Spinazzola said that in his post-match press conference, that like we can't even think about it because we've got basically 2 days to prepare for the next match. We got to start watching video footage and training and move forward. So I think that's actually a good thing for this team. But let's wrap it up there. Pete, as always, it's a pleasure to have you on, and you're first on video.
Oh, thank you, Joe. Pleasure's all mine. I had a good time.
Yeah, as did I always. You can find Pete on X at babysquid_1926, and you can find the Tri-State Napoli Club at Tri_Napoli Club. You can find me at Joe_Fischetti5, and you can find the podcast at Forza Napoli Pod. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want the audio version, you can find it on all the usual podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, and so on, Forza Napoli Podcast. And if you're listening and you want to watch the video version, I will have some graphics up for this. You can find that on YouTube. Just search Forza Napoli Podcast. I should be back for a review episode. If not right after the PSV match, then I may do an episode where I'll just combine the two. The next one's against Inter, so we'll see. I feel like Inter deserves a whole podcast to itself. So if we can, I'll try to squeeze in review pods for both of those matches. But whenever we do record again, until next time, I'm Joe Fischetti. Forza Napoli sempre.